Anita, there was a big piece that came out in the Atlantic talking about adjunct professors, not a topic that I had necessarily given a lot of thought to before until I saw some of the startling statistics on how many of them are living in poverty or paycheck to paycheck and what it's doing to the university system right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it was shocking to me that 25% of adjunct professors get some sort of public assistance. They either have SNAP benefits or Medicaid, or earned income
Right.
tax credit. It really was amazing. And, when we think of a college professor, you're obviously thinking of somebody who's making a six-figure salary, or
With elbow
certainly close
patches,
to it,
right.
and with elbow patches and a pipe. I mean, I think
Right.
that's the stereotype. And we don't think, and the reality of the Atlantic article, and it was covered in different press outlets as well, was that you're teaching out of the back of your car. And basically, the adjunct professor goes in, teaches whatever the class is, and if a student wants office hours, they basically have to pull their documents or books out of the back of a car because they're not given office space. And the question I ask is, first of all, how sad that you have this education. You have a doctoral degree or a master's degree,
Right.
and you can barely feed your family. That's number one. But the other thing is from the perspective of the college student and the perspective of the parent, perhaps, who's paying for this. What kind of service is the student getting? And do you think they're aware of the situation that the colleges, are using adjuncts that they're not keeping on staff?
I definitely don't think that the parents are aware, nor do I think that a student would necessarily recognize what they're missing out on until they look back on it and compare their education to some of their peers after they get out into the workplace. What struck me is how I feel like this is the next level of devaluing education. This has been
Right.
something that we've
Oh,
seen
interesting.
consistently, particularly with certain Republican governors that have just been striking education budgets left and right, both higher education and primary education. And I think that this is some of the trickle down from that, because you can't slash the budget of a public university, which they tend to be more disproportionately affected by this, and then expect them to be able to deliver the same quality service. And even in looking at how these teachers were described as part-time adjunct professors, it really makes it seem like they're working a few hours a week. So what are they complaining about? We've really done a good job of making them seem like they should be freeloaders. What do we even need them for anyway? And that's a huge problem.
Well, it is a huge problem because the colleges rely on them to keep their costs low because they don't want to offer tenure. They don't want to offer full-time positions. And so they're the ones that are making out like bandits about this. And,
Right.
it seems to me the American people are the ones who are losing because if we don't, I don't have, my husband and I don't have children, but that doesn't mean that we don't fund education because that also uplifts the
Right.
entire society. We have to think about as a society, we're making our flowers grow, as it were. And by fostering better education systems, isn't that going to help us to be tech leaders? Isn't that going to help us in science? Isn't that going to help us in terms of our innovation everywhere and to have more productive members of society, whether they attend trade schools or whether they go to college, whatever it happens to be? But you do need some sort of continuity, don't you, in terms of having a professor and some sort of a guidance counselor that you can rely on. And when you don't know where to find these people, doesn't that take away from the overall education that you're receiving?
Well, I went to a large university, and I can tell you there were a lot of adjunct professors there. And I, to some extent, don't have an issue with it because you don't need a rocket scientist to teach basic algebra. So when you have those large classes, particularly as freshmen and sophomores, I totally understand it to some extent. I think what bothers me a little bit more about this is the reliance on someone that can just teach out of a textbook versus real life experience. Because what I did like about my education was that our adjunct professors were just that. They were doing it in addition to real world
Right.
experience. The accounting adjunct professor also worked in an accounting firm. He did this a couple of nights a week. And so he was bringing real world experience to the table. The problem with relying on these people that have education and not much else to show for it besides that education, that's also a way where I feel like the students are being kind of neglected in a way. What good does it do? I can read a book, I can watch a YouTube video for that matter on pretty much any subject in the world. Give me someone that can show me something between the lines, and that's a real professor.
Yeah, absolutely. But that also brings up, well, some of these adjunct professors don't have another way to make a living. They're trying to make a living from this and scrape together as many part-time assignments as they can. And I think it also looks at, what kind of an economy we're in right now, and the changing face of the economy, where it's
Right.
independent and it's everybody for themselves. And the sharing economy, we're not sharing very much, but whatever kind of a situation we're living
Right.
in, there's no sort of worker loyalty, job security. This is just, it was disturbing to me, because it just was a way I had never thought about professors this way. And it reminds you that, wow, all of that security really is out the window, and we're looking at an entirely different employment model.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because something short term doesn't show a benefit doesn't mean that it's not valuable in the long term. There's not a lot of philosophers these days that are being paid, but that doesn't mean that philosophy is not a worthwhile, valuable thing for your child to learn and to participate in and to give some thought to. So, this short term thinking of, oh, well, you can't make a buck from it, so it has no value is just awful to me, and it goes to the core of what education is supposed to be versus what we're seeing unravel. So I definitely think that it's something that we should stay on top of as we continue to discuss this and other interesting topics on Dare We Say. In the meantime, this is Shauna Vircher alongside Anita Finley.